spirit-driven type stuff.
That's the goal.
Yeah. Alrighty, so everyone, hello. We are recording now. Welcome to the Audience of One podcast. So this is our first episode, and we are joined with Timotheous Pope. Going to give a little quick background or kind of the purpose behind this podcast and what our intention is with it. So as a collective, PSCA, for anyone watching this, we meet on Tuesday nights. We'll have fellowships, we'll have snacks, friends, time like that, and then we'll hear a message always. This podcast is kind of just going to be another outlet for anyone who maybe can't make that message on Tuesday or just wants to dive more into the topics that we're talking about. This Tuesday, we heard from Kate, where we learned more about what it means to hunger and thirst for righteousness. We're digging into the Beatitudes. So again, this is just going to be a really fun way to get to know some new people. Podcasts are super cool because you can watch this or you can listen to it on Spotify, kind of whatever you're doing in the kitchen on the way to class. So yeah, I'm excited for what Jesus is going to do through this. Timotheus is someone who's super, super fun to chat with, and he's going to be with us actually this coming Tuesday. So we're going to get to hear from him again. But enough of me talking. So let's get to you, Timotheus. So who are you? What do you do? Where are you from? And yeah, we'll start from there.
Yeah, Zoe, that's a loaded question. So I'm going to try to answer that as quickly as I can. I'm originally from Hurt, Virginia, which is a small town in Southern Virginia. I now live in Rector, PA. I am a Christian camp director, the CEO of Summer's Best 2 Weeks City Kids at Laurel Mountain Christian Camp. That's our official doing business as Thomas and Sandra Youth Campus, the name of the organization. And what I do is we believe that every human being should have access to a healthy lifestyle and the support to steward that well. And so what I do is spend my time helping people steward their healthy lifestyle. So 6 areas to life. There's your spiritual life, your mental life, your physical life, your social life, your emotional life, and your financial life. And we try to, in everything that we do, help people love Jesus in all 6 of those areas, giving them the information, the revelation, so that they can then conduct their application of how they live that out.
Wow. Yeah, I really, really love that. It sounds like you have a lot of like different pieces in that moving puzzle. I feel like, especially in college, because I know you do talk on a lot of college campuses, we're at an age where we're trying to kind of find God's purpose for our life. And you said a lot of things. There's a lot of big things that you're doing. How do you feel like, as you were growing up, you were able to discern God's will for your life? Because I know at this age, there's a lot of things being thrown at us. You're choosing majors, we're doing sports, all the things. We have a lot of different opinions coming from parents, friends. How were you specifically able to find God's purpose for your life?
Great question. So for me, I became a Christian when I was 4 years old. My dad is a pastor, was a pastor. He retired recently. And by the time I was 9 years old, I had this sense that God was calling me to do something. But where I grew up, the only thing I knew was missionary or pastor. I didn't know there was such thing as sports ministry or college ministry. Like none of that stuff existed. I mean, it existed, right? But not to me. I loved sports. I loved athletics. And when I was growing up, the way that people acted, you couldn't be a dominant athlete and a Christian at the same time. Like they just didn't go together. And so as I looked at professional sports then, I mean, there weren't a lot of outspoken Christians, much less dominant ones. Like the most outspoken Christian I knew of back then in the 80s was AC Green, who played for the Los Angeles Lakers at the time, but nobody was on the playground screaming AC Green, right? You're not taking the ball between legs and dunking on somebody and saying AC Green, like that ain't happening. And so I'll never forget late 80s, one of my older brothers was a big Philadelphia Eagles fan, and he loved those Philadelphia Eagles. And so I love those Philadelphia Eagles as well. And there were 2 guys on that team who became very outspoken in their faith. One of them was Randall Cunningham, and the other was Reggie White. And not that Randall wasn't a good quarterback, but Reggie White to this day is probably the most dominant defensive end to ever play the game of football. And I remember the first time I heard somebody call him the minister of defense, I went, yo, you can be a Christian and a dominant
Yeah.
athlete. Like you can
do
love
both.
God and be a dominant athlete. I didn't know that. And so
Yeah.
because I love sport, like I said, as early as age 9, I knew God was calling me to something.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that you could just love God in anything. I thought
Right.
if you're really going to love God, you got to go in full-time ministry. So when I saw Reggie White was a professional football player who loved Jesus and was dominant at it, it lit some spark in me that said, man, that's what I want to do. Either I'm
Yeah.
going to be that dominant athlete, or I want to walk alongside people in life and show them that you really can love God in anything. And so I think one of the ways that we discern what God's will is for our life and what he wants us to do is, what itch do you have that just has to be scratched? And that was, or like Morpheus says in the Matrix, what is the splinter in your mind that you just need to figure out? And for me, it was, how do you be the best at something and a Christian at the same time?
Yeah.
And what I began to understand, Zoe, is they're not mutually exclusive. Like the reality is, if I'm going to be a believer, I should be the best at stuff. Like I've got God himself, the Holy Spirit himself is inside of me and can tell me everything about business, everything about science, everything about sport, everything about whatever I want to know about. So why wouldn't I, with that inside track, be the best at whatever I'm going to do? So once I recognized that, growing up watching things like The Cosby Show and X-Men, I wanted to be Cliff Huxtable and Charles Xavier. Like that was my dream.
Yeah.
And so to this day, to be very honest with you, I was literally just having this conversation a few days ago. That's what I do. Like I am Professor Charles Xavier. We run this Christian camp. We bring people out here. We were at Kent State University last night, and I help people explore their gifts.
Yeah.
Like use your gifts to glorify God, and do not be apologetic for the fact that you're a really good speaker, or you're fast, or you're strong, or you can swim, or you can do business really, really well. Like I long for people. I long for myself to live the best versions of ourselves.
Yeah, no, I really, really love that. A couple of things that I kind of want to pick apart with what you said. The beginning part of it is when you were talking about you didn't really know that you could do both of the things, and you weren't seeing a lot of people, especially I can imagine social media obviously is a lot more prevalent now. So it's easy for us to see even people who may not be pastors just kind of preaching the word. I mean, it goes viral and we're able to see that and expose to it every day. Despite that, though, I feel like there are of what I would call like closeted Christians. There's a lot of people that are almost afraid to say something about their
Oh yeah,
faith, whether
absolutely.
it's because I think more of the pressure is less a lot of noise on the outside, but more within friend groups and the people we're surrounded with, especially in the athletic culture being at a big school. What advice would you give someone who, maybe is feeling God pressing on their heart a little bit, that they need to share more about their faith? They need to be more outspoken about it. They need to get more involved, but they're having trouble like really stepping into that with boldness. What advice would you give to that person?
Great question. Two things right off the top of my head. Number one, somebody's going to always have an issue with who you are and what you do. So you might as well be yourself and do what's right.
Like that.
I'm a huge fan of watching people be outspoken about their faith. So whether it's a Deion Sanders or a Kirk Cousins, like you put a target on your back.
Yeah.
But the reality is there's a target on your back anyway. Like if you don't talk about Jesus enough, they're gonna, I mean, Lecrae says this really, really well. You don't talk about Jesus enough, they're gonna hate you. If you talk about Jesus too much, they're gonna hate you.
Love
So
that.
you might as well talk about them, right? They're gonna be mad at you either way. You might as well let it fly. Second one that I learned when I was in high school that was really important to me, and I tell this to every student that I can. If Jesus means a whole lot to you, like he means everything to you, and you have friends, teammates, people that say they care about you, people that say they want to be in your life and involved in stuff, and you can't share what is most important to you, those people aren't really your friends. And so what I've learned is it is not fair for me to hide the fullness of who I am if I'm going to allow you to be the fullness of who you are, because I actually care about you. Yeah. So to treat you the way that I want to be treated, I want you to be the fullness of who you are with me. So I'm going to be the fullness of who I am with you. And so if Jesus means a whole lot to me, even if I don't know a whole lot about him, I'm still going to talk about what I do know. And
Yeah.
so I think sometimes what pigeonholes us Christians, Zoe, is we think we have to know everything about Jesus in order to talk about him. Or what happens when we encounter something that we can't answer? And it's like, I can't answer. I love the game of basketball. I've played it for a long time. I've trained. I mean, I'll train kids tonight. I don't know everything about basketball. I don't know every player that's ever played. I don't know every offense. I don't know every defense. I don't know all the trends that are happening. But what I do know is fundamental. And I just need to know the basics. I don't know everything about gravity, but I know enough to not jump off this building that I'm in, right? And so I think that's the thing. I think we make Christianity way more complicated and complex than it needs to be. It's really simple. It's simply profound. And as somebody once said, it's profoundly simple.
I love that. Where do you think is the main driving factor that you've been able to kind of like something that's unique about you? I see whenever you teach or watching your videos, you have this really unique sense of authenticity to you. You're very, very real. You're quick to tackle like hard topics unapologetically. You're just quick to have that boldness and speak your mind. We see that with a lot of characters in the Bible. What do you think, when did you first identify this characteristic about yourself, and how, as you've grown up, are you able to cultivate that? Because I know when people begin to be more outspoken about their faith and have a characteristic like that, hearing the opinions of others and, the outside pressure of the world, it can dull that. How do you think you've been able to keep the fire of that going and really just, I don't know, cultivate it to a sense where you're doing what you are today?
Yeah, for sure. Great question. First, let me say it hasn't always been that way. And I think that's really important for people to hear. And I was literally sharing a story last night at a dinner table. So I got asked a similar question. And what people need to know is, when I was in 10th grade, there was a young man named Runday Juicy Hall, and he is forever cemented in my testimony. We played basketball together starting in 7th grade, and from 7th grade to 10th grade, something like that. I mean, we spent every day together. It wasn't like we were best friends or any of that, but I was with him every single day. He grew to be 6'4". He was a great athlete, and his girlfriend's locker was next to mine. So we were together every single morning because he was at his girlfriend's locker, which was right next to mine. And so I literally saw him every day, for months at a time during basketball season and outside of basketball season, from Little League all the way to 10th grade. And I'll never forget this. My parents, like I told you, my dad is a pastor. We ran this big old lock-in down in Eden, North Carolina at a YMCA. It'd be tons and tons of students there. And I invited Juice to go. And I can't remember how many times Juice went, but I remember as Juice was getting letters from all kinds of schools, we thought he'd be the next big thing in our community. We had a slam dunk contest that night. I'll never forget it. And then the gospel was going forth. And I was thinking to myself, man, I need to make sure Juice hears the gospel. And I remember looking at the bleachers, and I was walking around the bleachers, and I saw him half under the bleachers, and he looked like he was asleep. Cemented in my mind, Zoe, black and white Nike shorts, white Nike socks with a black check, black and white Nike slides. He was laying half under the bleachers. And I remember thinking, man, I don't want him to be mad at me, so I don't want to wake him up. So I didn't. I let him sleep. He might have been awake, I don't know, but I passed on the opportunity.
Yeah.
That July on his birthday, 2 months later, he got killed in a car accident.
Wow.
And the first thought that came to my mind was, I never shared the gospel with him. I spent every day with him. We were at basketball practice all the time. We talked about a lot of things, and I never shared the gospel with him. And I made a decision then when I was in 10th grade, that will never happen again. There will never be somebody in my life that long, that often, that I do not spend time sharing. If I'm saying Jesus is most important to me, I'm going to share honestly. So that was the first big thing. Like Juice dying without me sharing the gospel was the first big thing. The next big thing in my life was, as a pastor's kid, I asked a lot of tough questions. And I never felt like people had really good answers or would be authentic. I mean, I asked about sex. I asked about drugs. I asked about why babies die. I asked about why people why would a devout Muslim go to hell? Like, I was asking all of those questions. And a lot of the times I wasn't satisfied with the answers I got. And so I was reading the scriptures, I was like anybody else, just asking tough questions. And so, because I didn't want to believe Christianity if it could be knocked down. Like, I don't want to believe the faith is a sham. So I asked the tough questions. Not only that, though, because I was a Christian, I also lived a double life. So I was hiding from people, living inauthentically at church. Then at school, I was a whole nother person, right? I was the kid that would sag his pants and cuss and listen to music that I shouldn't have been listening to just to say I'm one of everybody else. And then at home, I got my Christian parents, my dad, who's a pastor. I'm living a certain way at home. So I became multiple people. And when I got serious about Jesus, probably my junior year of high school, like going into my senior year of high school, it's like, yo, you can't live like that.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna bang on all of these pastors and Christian leaders who are falling, sleeping with prostitutes and all of that. You mad at them, but you ain't no different.
Right.
So at that
Yeah.
time, I really did want to not be, I didn't want to be somebody. One of the things that I write on my wall, I didn't want to be somebody whose life and lips didn't match.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to be that if I'm saying something, I'm doing it. If I'm doing something, I'm saying it. Like I no longer wanted to be the person who was hiding. So my wife is often like, dude, I feel like you overshare. You be saying like some stuff you probably shouldn't be saying to people. And I'm like, but babe, I know what it's like on the other end to hide. Like I know what it's like to say, in confession, oh, I did some things I wasn't supposed to. Well, that's not hard to say.
Yeah.
Right. But when you have to say, oh no, like I was with this girl and would have had sex with her unless somebody else walked into the room. Like just to say that out loud.
Yeah.
It scared me. Like, dude, you literally almost gave up your virginity for this girl and for no reason. Like you're not.
Yeah.
And so being honest with others, this is going to sound strange, but being honest with others helped me be honest with myself.
Yeah. I love that.
And I don't feel like it was the other way around. Like I don't feel like I could be honest with myself.
Yeah.
So I had to start just vomiting on people like, yo, this is what I did. And then it's like, well, now it's out there, so I got to deal with it.
Right.
And I have to be honest with me.
That element of transparency, I think, is so important. And I think without that, it can discourage a lot of people from progressing in their faith. That
Absolutely.
element of shame, like that is a really good tactic of the enemy that he tries to use. Something you said your junior year of high school is when you kind of, I don't know if I think of it in my own life as like, when you grow up in the faith, you are committed to Christ, but you can have like a recommitment to Christ.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like where you truly make your main purpose of your life about Christ, outside of your parents, outside of anyone else. And it sounds like you made that decision. You said your junior year of high school, that shift. What brought that shift on in your life?
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you. I continually make that shift.
Yeah.
And I think what brought that on my junior year of high school was Juice's death, because he died, my sophomore year. But then the other thing I think that brought that on was I got to a place where I just started asking the question, like, what are you going to actually do with your life?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if this is real, like, then it's like, do it. Don't like half do it. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't like stop trying to do the amphibious Christian life, like the cosmetic Christian life where you look good on the outside, but you, as a friend of mine says, you look good from afar, but you far from looking good. Right. Like I was like, I'm sick and tired of that. I'm sick and tired of playing the double life. I'm sick and tired of being an amphibious Christian. Like, let's just do it. Like, if we're going to do it, my mom said something to me then that has stuck with me. She was like, everybody is trying to be like everybody else, trying to dress like everybody else.
Yes.
Trying to talk like everybody else. What if somebody just started a new trend and just was different, just to be different?
Yeah.
And so I took that to heart. And so I tried to be that person and started wearing shirt and tie to school.
Yeah.
I started wearing all kind of rubber bands and writing Bible verses on my skin every time I played. When I was on the court, I started wearing these, crazy socks. And it's funny because I look at it today and I'm like, yo, everybody made fun of me for doing that. And now everybody's doing that. Everybody's tatted. I was doing it with a magic marker. But anyway, I think that's what happened. I just got tired of the double life.
Yeah.
I got tired of not being able to look in my own eyes in the mirror and be excited about who's looking back. Like I got to that point where I said, no, I just want to be myself.
Yeah. And I feel like what you're saying, everyone trying to be, like fit in, until you're broken out of that cycle, you don't realize how much energy it took to begin with.
Absolutely.
You're able to have this like sense of fullness when you're walking in what Christ had for you. And
Yeah,
back to what you're saying too, when you're like, if I'm going to do it, why don't I just do it? I think pulling that back in athletically, a lot of people, a lot of places you go and speak, and the athletic aspect of it, all of us have this quality and this characteristic that has enabled us to get where we are. And a lot of times that's the ability to, put your whole into something and dive
absolutely.
into it. And I think it's a characteristic that because a lot of us are here, and specifically at Penn State, it's something that a lot of us have, and we don't see how unique that is. And when we give that to Jesus and we let Him use it, like you said, you've seen the ministry stuff you're doing, like Jesus will take that and He will take it way farther, like than you could ever imagine. And you already
Absolutely.
have that ability in you, and we can see that athletically in the sports that we do, the ability we have to just put all this commitment into this, singular thing.
Absolutely.
That's great. Well, let's move on a little bit. Let's get into the word. So, over these past couple months at PSCA, we've been digging into the Beatitudes. And for anyone who doesn't really know kind of the background of the Beatitudes, Jesus gave what we know as being called the Sermon of the Mount. He basically gave a prophetic message to a giant group of people. The apostles were also there, and he's generally just explaining some characteristics of his followers, empowering Christians to live a more wholeheartedly like life for God, and their faith aside from just works and law that we see a lot in the Old Testament. So this message by him was more just to kind of empower all of us to, stop towing that line and really live all in for him. And the specific beatitude that we looked at this past Tuesday, Kate did a beautiful job at explaining what it really means to hunger and thirst for the righteousness of Christ. So I'm going to read that verse really quick. It's Matthew 5:6. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. So Matthias, this is a big general question, but what does it mean to hunger and thirst for the righteousness of Christ?
Oh, great question. Practically, it means to hunger and thirst like in any other way.
Yeah.
And so if you're hungering and thirsting, this is just a quick personal story. Like you talk about authenticity. Wednesdays are my intermittent fasting days. And because it was travel scheduled for me, we ate dinner last night at like 5:30, and I still haven't eaten yet. So it's like 2:00, right? And my body's like, hey man, like, what you doing?
What's going on? Yeah.
But everything is affected, right?
Yeah.
So like I can feel the saliva on my lips. I can feel my stomach like going, hey man, like we need to get something in. I can feel the irritability of my body going, hey, look, like where is the food? Like, what are you doing? And I think and same thing with thirst. I do my best to not drink a lot during my fast too. If I drink anything, it'll generally be water or a protein shake because I'll do a liquid. It's a food fast, but not a liquid fast. So I'll do a protein shake. But it's a part of my workout too. So like after I do this workout, and today was a 700 rep workout, which is just awful. So I spent 2.5 hours on the road, do this 700 rep workout, haven't eaten anything. My body's like, dude, we need to consume something. And hunger for righteousness is the same. Like when you truly hunger for righteousness, give you a prime example. I was talking to somebody yesterday who was telling me that to survive, it was a young person I was talking to, that young person left home at age 16. And to survive, that young person would basically use their body to sell in order to survive, right?
Yeah.
When you hunger and thirst after righteousness, just like when I'm hungry, something rises up in you that goes, that's not right. That's not just. I wanted to take that person and say, you're leaving with me and going to my house. Like, I'm going to take care of you. Like, there is this sense in which you long for God's justice in all things. So when you see slavery, when you see oppression, when you see people that are not treated with respect, when you see people that are not treated with dignity, when you're watching the news and you see people in countries where they don't have food, running water, those kind of things, and you look at what you have, there's a hunger and a thirst that says, no, I want to supply that need. What Jesus said, when you see somebody hungry, when you see them thirsty, when you see them naked, when you see them in prison, when you see them homeless. Like there is a moving outward that says, I got to do something here. No different than when you're hungry or you're thirsty. Your body is telling you need to go get a drink, telling you need to go to eat. When you hunger and thirst for righteousness of God, it's saying, not only do I want to see God's justice imparted on this planet, I want to experience the righteousness that was supposed to be availed to me before the fall here and now. So it's like a double entendre of, when you really want that righteousness, that right standing with God, that right relationship with God, man, you want that for everybody. And you want that for everything. There's nothing you see, Isaiah 58, right? There's nothing you see that you're like, that's broken. Oh, well, no, you see broken things and you go, no, I want to address that.
Yeah. As you're speaking, I'm like, I love that. Like, I'm getting a little fired up because that feeling of just like wanting what Jesus wanted or wants for the world, like it's something that is so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I think even again, I'm trying to pull this athletically, like a lot of us have that drive for our sport, right? Like we get up every day, like we do absurd things, spend hours and hours and hours training, and for that feeling, right? And it's so important for people to know that hunger and thirst for righteousness, like you're saying, and all those things, we have access to that every day. And we have
Absolutely.
access to that beyond our sport, after college, all of it. Like we can have access to that every day, and it's found in Jesus. But it's one thing to identify, what it means to be hungry for the righteousness of Christ. I think you did a great job explaining it. But that's something that I know a lot of people know it doesn't happen overnight. So, getting to a place, like how do you get to a place where you are hungry for the righteousness of Christ?
That's a great question. This is a podcast, so I can disagree with you. I do think it can happen overnight, just like real hunger can happen overnight, right? Like if I don't eat like I didn't last night, like overnight I'm hungry. But it's the same thing. Right. I think that there is this sense in which the two times that I'm hungriest are when I haven't eaten a lot. And this is going to sound strange, when I've eaten a really good meal. Like whenever I eat a really good meal, I cannot wait for the next one. I'm like, yo, that was amazing. I cannot wait for the next. But to be honest, so there's this place that we ate at on Monday night that has this thing called a super burrito. This place will remain nameless.
Love burritos.
I love burritos, right? But it was too small. Like the burritos at Chipotle were much better, are much better. And so I go to this place, I get the super burrito, it's a plate, I eat it, and I'm like, yo, I'm still hungry. Now, listen carefully, I've eaten, but it just wasn't enough.
Yeah.
Right? And it wasn't that the food didn't taste good, it just wasn't enough. And so I think part of hungering and thirsting for righteousness is I'm in the word. Like this morning, I was in Isaiah 58, and I'm devouring Isaiah 58. And it's so good. I'm like, yo, I want more of Isaiah 58. But we had to drive 2.5 hours. So I'm like, man, I cannot wait to get out of this car and in my office and get back to this, right?
Yeah.
But again, those two times, like it was either I'm eating something really, really good, Isaiah 58, and I want to get back to it, or those times when, like I said yesterday, I'm seeing something is broken. And I'm like, yo, I want to fix that. I want to do everything I can to address that. I think those are the two times. And that's why I say it can happen overnight, but understanding your question, I think what you're asking is, how does your heart enter that place? And I think part of it is first recognizing what to eat and what not to eat.
Okay.
Like there are some of us who are spiritually starving because we're feasting on the supplements, right? We're doing the devotionals that somebody else has written. We are listening to the podcast that somebody else is telling us how to think about the Lord, but we're not really drinking from his fountain himself, right? We're not really eating from the scriptures ourselves. And so I think part of what creates a hunger, just like any other time, is you knowing what to eat and then you eating some good of that, and or you recognizing that you're remembering the taste of something, but you're not actually eating it. That happens a lot too.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think you touched on something that in this generation is super prevalent with social media. We see a lot of these pastors or a lot of the people we follow talking about Christ and kind of like spoon feeding it to us.
Yeah.
This is something in the past that I was super convicted on, people are telling you their revelation of the word, but you're not directly getting that from God. And I think that's something, like you said, you can only really happen when you're in it with God. You're in the scriptures, when He's changing the desire of your heart in general. Uh, so again, back on the whole idea of righteousness itself, it's a very like high standard, right? Like to be righteous. And you talked on this a little bit when you came last time. What does one do when they feel like, despite their best effort, they are continually falling short of this hunger for righteousness, or outside of the hunger, just righteousness in general, that righteousness of Christ? And they're wanting to get they're in this pursuit of just wanting to get closer to God, but they keep falling short. How does someone kind of grapple and deal with that?
Great question. But you killing this, by the way.
Yeah.
First time on the podcast. I just got to tell
Yeah.
you, if it's your first time doing this podcast, it doesn't
Yeah.
sound like it's your first time. You
Thank
absolutely
you.
killing it. I want to
I
answer your question,
appreciate
but I
it.
had to give you your
Thank you.
flowers.
I appreciate it.
Very welcome. I said this to a group of men last week. We had a group of men right outside the door in the studio where I am. And I said, identity is where you start. And I can tell you, when I was in a junior in high school, I hit this again when I was a junior in college. I hit this again probably 2-3 years after college, right when I was married. Hit it again when we had each kid, and we got 8 of them. So I keep hitting it with kids. Hit it when my son Judah went into the hospital. Identity. Like, I think we spend so much time defining righteousness as doing the right thing that we forget that righteousness starts with being in right relationship with God.
Love
And I said this to these men, and it's the thing that is now etched in my memory, and I'm going to continue to say it. I joke with my kids, and I'll ask them if they love Jesus. Of course, they say, yes, Daddy, we love Jesus. And I'm like, if you love him, is he your friend? Yes, he's our friend. All right, cool. Well, if he's a friend of yours, what's his last name? And they're like, what? What's his last name? Like, he got to have a last name. You don't even know your last name, last name of your best friend. And so they'll look at me and say, well, what do you say his last name is? So I say his last name is Christ. It's probably of Nazareth or Bar Joseph, something like that, but whatever. Yeah. This is what I said to those men, and what I would say to anybody who says, hey, I keep finding myself fall short of righteousness. First and foremost, see your identity as in right relationship with Jesus. If you see that, understand that you are family, and God has given you a name. Watch this. God has given you a name like his son, Jesus. So if you saw yourself as Zoe Christ, as opposed to Zoe Duffus,
yeah,
right? I know people mess your name up, which I think I messed it up the first time I mentioned.
Yeah, anyway, no, you're good. You're good.
If you saw yourself as Zoe Christ,
yeah,
it's different than seeing yourself as Zoe. Like, if I see myself as Timotheous Christ instead of Timotheous Pope, like Timotheous Pope might speed. Timotheous Christ goes, no, wait, I got a last name that means too much, right? It's like, a Paris Hilton, Michael Jordan's kids. Even as I've listened to Deion Sanders talking about Shador and Shiloh and his kids, it's like, your last name comes with some clout that makes what you do different.
Mm-hmm.
And I told those men, if you saw yourself as your name Christ, then when you sat in front of a computer at 10 p.m. and you know your last name is Christ, you're gonna live different than if you see yourself as your last name. So like righteousness is a part of that. I'm in right relationship with him. I have his last name. Mm-hmm. And that means when I say I am, I should consider that when I say the words I am, that's Yahweh's name. Mm-hmm. And so I told those men, and I'll tell anybody who's listening, what if we started thinking my last name is Christ, and whatever I say after I am, I want the power of Yahweh to magnify that.
Yeah. I like
How much
that.
different would Zoe Duffus's life be if every time you said I am, I'm, you had to follow it with words that you want Yahweh to magnify by his power? Yeah. Then you're less likely to say, well, I'm a sinner, right? Yeah. Or I'm a failure, or, I'm an idiot. Like, you want, I am is what you said. He said that's his name. You got Jesus is your brother. God has given you that. Man, live like that identity belongs to you. So even when you find yourself falling short, man, my last name Christ. It don't. Yeah. I heard Deion say this about Shador. Man, his last name Sanders. He done been through this before. This ain't new. Right. Yeah. Same thing. Like, if we understand that our last name is Christ, and I'm not saying it literally is, I'm saying if we think in that identity,
Yeah.
It will change the way we even see righteousness, because I'm in right relationship first. Like, I'm not doing what is right righteousness. I'm being in right relationship. And that leads me to not just doing right, but being right.
Yeah, I love that. And when you say like in right relationship, a lot of times like I feel like in the past that's something that's like, oh, it could be a stressful thing. What does it mean to be in right relationship? But I think our greatest call is to get to know God. And if
Absolutely.
we are getting to know God and we are getting to know Jesus, He is changing the desires of our heart. He says that. Like we don't have to do that in our own like strength
Absolutely.
at all. So
Absolutely.
He will give us that righteousness. And that's something that's so cool. In addition to that, a lot of what you're saying, I just hear in my head like get back up, like get back up, get back up, like God kind of calling us to do that. And we do that in sport every day. The amount of athletes that go through injuries, that get knocked down on a drill, that, get knocked down on a play or, don't have the best game, like we are continuing the cycle of getting back up. And it's the same thing that Jesus calls us to do, which I think is really special. And another thing too that you hit on, talking about like kind of that negative self-talk, like I'm this, I'm that aren't necessarily great characteristics that we establish with ourselves, and redirecting that towards Christ is an amazing strategy that I love that you pointed out. And I do want to say one more thing for anyone listening or watching. Just because you follow Jesus and you love God, like we are all going to be battered by our sinful fleshly desires. Like that's like who we are. Like we are human, but that's not whose we are. Like we are Jesus's kids, we're his children. So anyone who, I just felt the Holy Spirit telling me to say that anyone who's struggling with these things, we all do. Like it's a battle that we all go through. And reclaiming that by no, I'm Christ's, that's something that is super great. So I love that. It looks
Absolutely.
like we have about like 3 or 4 more minutes left. So I think we've covered like all the things that I really wanted to get to with digging more into the message. Is there anything else you want to say or anything else that's on your heart to, kind of speak to us?
Absolutely. Two things. One, Zoe, you killed it. So anybody listening, when you see Zoe on campus, dap Zoe up. Great job, Zoe. You killed it. Second thing, I'm excited to be with y'all Tuesday night.
Yeah.
We are going to be in the book of Isaiah, because that's what's been kicking my behind. So if you listen to me online right now, preached at FCA at Kent State on Monday night from Isaiah 40, Isaiah 41 last night. I'm not going to tell y'all where I'm going to be at with you yet, but it will be in Isaiah. And then I'll be continually preaching Isaiah, hopefully posting that stuff online. So just walk with me through Isaiah. Third one, that is the most important. Jesus was human. And I was going to post this on Instagram, and I still might even after this. I was going to post this on Instagram because sometimes, and you talk about authenticity, sometimes people are like, yeah, and like I was authentic and I said some cuss words. And it's like, all right, hold up. Like Jesus was authentic, but authenticity doesn't mean I have to do the wrong thing, right? Authenticity means as he conforms me into his likeness.
Yeah.
When I want to say cuss words, right? When I want to, God by his power restrains that. I tell people all the time, salvation comes and sanctification is not something you work on. Like you don't need to work on your relationship with the Lord. You said it, like he works that out of you. Philippians chapter 2, verse 13 and follow. Like it's God who works in you to willing to do of his good pleasure. Your muscles are inside of you. We work them out, but we work them out by giving them something that they cannot do, something that they cannot lift, something that's too much for them so that they get stronger. So in your sport, in your life, whatever you do, if you play soccer, you should approach every practice thinking, yo, I want to hunger and thirst for righteousness, what is right. So I want to get this play right every time. When you're looking at your playbook as a football player, whatever you do, I want to get this play right. I want to hunger for righteousness here because that's practice for hungering for righteousness everywhere. And then in life, when you walk in through the cafeteria, when you see that person sitting alone, the hunger and thirst for righteousness there. Hey, I want to make sure that this person is safe and is good and is okay. And so my encouragement to you all at Penn State and all over to whoever would listen to the podcast is part of hungering and thirsting after righteousness is God saying, you have as much of me as you want. God ain't trying to withhold nothing from you. He's not in heaven going, Zoe, you can't handle but so much, so I'm not giving you everything. No, he's in heaven going, no, Zoe, I want you to know me as much as you can possibly know me. It's on us then to say, how much do I want to know?
Yeah, that's a word. I love that. Well, guys, this is Timotheous Pope. All his social media is going to be in the description. So if you want to hear more from him, obviously check that out. But also come next Tuesday because he is going to be preaching and it is always so much fun. So thank you guys for listening. The first episode of Audience of One is done. Thank you, Timotheous, and we will see you on Tuesday.
My pleasure. Peace.